Concessions in real estate, are they good or bad? Most concessions in real estate are seller concessions, although there can be both buyer and seller concessions. Seller concessions are generally financial contributions a seller makes towards a buyer's closing cost or other expense associated with purchasing the property. This provides relief for the buyer by lowering their upfront cost and increasing their purchasing power. So what should you know about seller concessions? Concessions can be closing cost assistance, home repairs, home improvements, home warranties, seller's occupancy, title work, and right now we are seeing interest rate buy-down concessions as well. Closing cost assistance is the most common, especially when it involves first-time home buyers. Normally these include appraisal fees, origination fees, recording fees, and discount points. Appraisal fees I would normally consider being part of the closing cost if there is a lender involved. However, if it were a cash deal and you still wanted an appraisal, that cost would not normally be included. Frankly, if it's a cash deal, one probably doesn't even need help or assistance from the seller anyway. Origination fees are typically due to be paid to the lender and are part of the way to cover the lender's cost and also make the transaction profitable for them. Recording fees are just like they sound. They are to record documents with various government agencies and record the transaction with the county. Discount fees are fees paid to the lender and usually result in a lower interest rate for the buyer. I know that was a lot of information and it can be confusing. If you need more information, contact us at thehomebuyersalesteam.com or call 970-256-7200. Home repairs can be another concession made by the seller to the buyer. Typically, a home purchase is subject to an inspection done by a pro. Inspection is normally paid out of pocket by the buyer and as such is outside the contract. The buyer receives an inspection report and depending on the report, the current market and the severity of any deficient items found, an inspection objection can be filed by the buyer. The seller's given time is dictated by the contract to reply and receive and accept the buyer concessions. If this inspection resolution is not received by the contract deadline date, the contract terminates automatically without question. As can be imagined, there can be a lot of tense times during this, so having a top realtor to negotiate your side is a must. Home warranties are available, although I don't see them offered by the seller very often in this area. These can be a way to resolve inspection issues. We have several home warranty companies marketing to our area, so it would be a good idea to check with your realtor as to the acceptability of the warranty. We do sometimes see sellers offering monetary concessions for certain repairs, such as new flooring, painting, or other items that are certainly in need of updating or repairs. These concessions can be used successfully, especially if the buyer is short on cash or available funds to handle the down payment. In those cases, the monies would usually be escrowed at closing to be paid to a certain supplier or contractor. It's best that these suppliers or contractors be given time to provide a written quotation which would provide for a firm price for the escrow dollar amounts. Seller post-occupancy concessions are sometimes used to make a successful offer and result in contract to purchase. In our area, the norm is for the buyer to take possession immediately after closing and funding all happening at the same time. However, as can be imagined, this can sometimes be difficult on the seller. Colorado even has a standard post-occupancy agreement that is part of the original contract. Title search fees in some areas of the country might be a concession, and on rare occasions it could be used here in GJ if the buyers are willing to pay for the title insurance. But in Colorado, the custom is for the seller to pay for the title search and hopefully the resultant title insurance. It makes sense to do it this way because why shouldn't the seller be able to provide the buyer with a clear title without encumbrances or other claims? Something that has become more popular recently is the interest rate buy-downs being done by the sellers. One can imagine with the higher interest rates we have seen in the last year and a half or so, and the really high rates we saw at the end of 2023, that buyers were becoming reluctant to make a purchase thinking that rates would come down. Although today's rates are just about average for what they have been for the past 30 or 40 years, many expect, and frankly I think they're dreaming, that interest rates will come down significantly. I guess it depends on how you define significant. but there's no way we're going to see interest rates in the 2 and 3% range for almost ever. The last time we saw interest rates that low was in the early 50s. So I guess if you want to wait 65 or 70 years, maybe so. Anyway, what has become popular is a 2-1 buy down, where the seller will pay fees up front to the lender to have the interest rate 2 percentage points lower than the current market calls for the first year. And then going into the second year, the interest rate would be 1 percentage point lower than now. The buyer still has to qualify for the base interest rate, which would become used in year 3 and beyond. We will sometimes see sellers just do a buy down for the entire term, which has worked well for some new builds, but I haven't seen much of those in the resale market, but anything is negotiable. In a buyer's market where there's more competition for sellers, these concessions become more regular and numerous. In a seller's market like we had extensively back through 2021, a buyer even had to often pay above the asking price while waiving some of the normal purchase contingencies. In summary, I'll say concessions are an important part of a typical real estate transaction and can be complicated. So if there are any questions, let us know.